On the morning of June 27, 2012, inside Moscone Center in San Francisco, Sergey Brin stood on a stage and told a few thousand developers to look up. On the screens above him, a video feed jittered from a small airship circling the roof, streamed live from a pair of glasses worn by a skydiver about to jump. The skydivers landed on the roof, handed the feed to stunt cyclists, then rappelled down the side of the building, every second broadcast through the device Brin was selling. It was one of the most expensive demos in the company's history, and it worked. It set an expectation Google could not keep. Because the thing that beamed those pictures was not a product. It was a research prototype, and within a year, Google would sell it to the public for $1,500 and call it a beta. This is the story of how a field trial got mistaken for a launch, and why the backlash that followed was not an accident, but the predictable price of that choice. The device came out of Google X, the division the company had built for what it called moonshots, bets too strange or too far off for the rest of Google. Run by AstroTeller and staffed by researchers, X existed to chase problems that might take a decade and might never pay off at all. Project Glass was one of those bets. The public first met it in April 2012 in a concept film titled One Day. A first-person walk through an ordinary morning, with directions and messages floating as captions in the wearer's vision. It was a wish, not a spec sheet. Inside X, the framing was explicit. Glass was a way to get a computer off the desk and onto the face, to test whether people wanted information in their eyeline at all. It was an open research question, and the honest answer in 2012 was that nobody knew. The hardware reflected that uncertainty. Led by Babak Parviz, the researcher who had worked on contact lens displays, the team packed a camera, a touchpad, a battery, and a tiny projector into a titanium band light enough to wear all day. It was a genuine feat of engineering. It was also, by the standards of a shipping consumer device, unfinished, short on battery life and thin on things to actually do. The turn came at that same I.O. in June. After the skydivers, Brin made an offer. Developers in the audience could pre-order a device, the Glass Explorer edition, for $1,500 to be delivered the following year. The word Explorer was chosen with care. It signaled a frontier, an expedition, participants rather than customers. But the price tag and the delivery date signaled something else entirely. A product you could buy. Google was trying to hold both ideas at once. Calling it a beta was not dishonest exactly. Software companies had trained a generation to expect betas, public, unfinished, improving in the open, but a web beta lives on your own screen. A beta strapped to your face points outward, at everyone who never signed up to test anything. When the Explorer units shipped in early 2013, first to developers and then, through invitations, to a widening public, the contradiction shipped with them. Each unit carried a small camera above the right eye, a bone conduction speaker and a prism that floated a screen into view. It was, by any plain reading, a wearable computer with a camera you could not obviously tell was recording. Google knew the camera was the problem. In February 2014, the company published a set of etiquette guidelines for explorers, do's and don'ts for wearing glass in public. The do's asked wearers to ask permission before filming and to explain the device to strangers. The don'ts were blunter. Don't be creepy or rude, the document read. And then, in Google's own words, aka a glasshole. It is a remarkable document. A company was issuing a code of conduct for a device it was selling, telling its own paying customers how not to make everyone around them uncomfortable. The etiquette memo was an admission that the social problem existed and that hardware alone would not solve it. The word did the rest. Glasshole entered the culture faster than Glass did. It named a specific figure, the person at the next table who might be recording you and whom you had no way to check. The bans followed the word. Bars in San Francisco and Seattle posted signs turning Glass away. In 2014, the Motion Picture Association and theatre owners asked patrons to remove the device in cinemas. Casinos, hospitals and other venues did the same, each for the same reason: a camera on the face that never had to be raised. In one widely reported incident in early 2014, a woman wearing glass in a San Francisco bar said she was confronted and had the device pulled from her face. The story traveled because it crystallized the mood. The technology had become a provocation just by being worn. The lawmakers were already watching. In May 2013, before the device had even reached most explorers, a bipartisan group of members of Congress wrote to Larry Page asking how Glass would protect the privacy of the people it filmed who had never agreed to anything. Google's answers did not settle the question. None of this was hidden from Google. The etiquette memo, the congressional letter, the venue bans, they arrived while the device was still on sale, while the company was still inviting new explorers in. The feedback loop was working. The strategy did not bend to it. There was another market the whole time, and Google would eventually find it. The people who genuinely needed a screen in their eye line and both hands free were not commuters checking the subway. They were workers on factory floors, in warehouses, in operating theatres. In 2017, 2 years after the consumer program ended, Google reintroduced the device as Glass Enterprise Edition. It went to companies like AGCO, Boeing, and DHL, where a technician could follow assembly instructions or pick orders without looking down at a manual. No one on a factory line called it creepy, because everyone on the line knew what it was for and why it was there. That was the road not taken. The enterprise floor was a controlled space with a clear job and consenting participants, closer to a field trial than a public sidewalk ever was. It was, arguably, where Glass should have started. On January 15, 2015, Google announced that the Explorer program would close. Sales of the $1,500 device stopped days later. Glass moved out of Google X and, for a time, under Tony Fadell, the executive behind Nest, a signal that the freewheeling research phase was over. Officially, nothing had failed. The project was graduating from the lab. But the consumer dream, the one sold on that stage in 2012, the glasses everyone would wear down the street, was quietly shelved, and it did not come back. Read back through the documents, the concept film, the Explorer offer, the etiquette memo, and the lesson sits in plain sight. Google spent 2 years insisting Glass was a beta, an experiment, a work in progress you were lucky to test. But the public does not read internal framing. A prototype worn on a stranger's face, in a bar or on a bus, is not a beta to the person being filmed. It is a product and it is a camera, whatever the company that made it chooses to call it. The technology was not the thing that broke. The decision was the choice to take an open research question, price it, and send it into the street to answer itself. Glass worked exactly as it was built. It was the launch that was still a prototype.